Okay, so through baptism, we begin the process of renewing our mind by linking something that happened in the spiritual to a representation or a representational act in the natural that I personally believe cuts a new neural pathway for us and begins the process of renewing our mind. And the reason I say that it begins that process is because you cannot properly or hold a proper view of yourself in Christ if you don't start with the understanding that the old you completely died and a new you has been born, and there is an entirely new version of you that has to be developed from ground zero. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you start trying to add on Jesus to your existing life. You try to take your old life into your new life and pair it up with spiritual things, and it creates all kinds of messiness because you can't do that. When you're born again, it means what it says. It means you died. Every part of who you were, your personality, the way you think, the way you talk, the way you act, the people you like, the movies you watch, the things you do, the things you eat, everything died. And you're starting over from ground zero, being built up from the ground up in Christ within a new frame of reference so that you have a new mind, a new way of thinking. Now, obviously, in practical terms, we still have the old nature and the old mind with all of the baggage and everything that came along with that. And so that is the process of renewal, where we have to go in and we have to take all the ways that we once understood things, render those things dead one at a time, and learn new things to replace them. That's the renewing of the mind, but that's also why I say that baptism is so imperative to this renewing of the mind process, because I believe that that is the trigger point where you connect what happened in the spiritual to the natural. And also conjunctively, it is signifying to the supernatural realm that they no longer have a legal claim against you. And so when they come to accuse, they have to now accuse you from a different angle because they don't have a legal claim there anymore. Oh, and also they have to ask permission as well. That's the other thing. When you're baptized, it translates you out of the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. And I genuinely believe that one really imperative part about that process is that it actually cancels their right to accuse you because you made that transition visible, basically. And so by doing that, they now have to go and actually ask permission to come and accuse you. That's my belief. I don't know that I could demonstrate that biblically, but that's just my observation. Okay, so once you're baptized, then from there, what do you do? What does life look like? So because you don't have a frame of reference for spiritual things, you have to begin with something simple. And so we go to Micah 6:8, and in Micah 6:8, it says, "Human being, you have already been told what is good, what Adonai demands of you. 2, act justly, to love mercy or grace, depending on which translation you're looking at, and to walk in purity with your God." Now, act justly is pretty simple. This is basically just accord your life in alignment with what would be considered just in God's eyes. So think in terms of you have God's righteous judgments. Align yourself in such a way that that is in righteous alignment with Him in the way that you conduct and accord your life, more or less. And this also pertains to how you treat other people, treating other people in accordance with what is just. Don't take advantage of people. Don't do things that under God's righteous judgment would be considered in violation of the way that we ought to treat others. So act justly. The second one is love mercy, or love grace, depending on the translation that you're looking at. Now, that word basically means that you love when a person doesn't get what they deserve. That's probably the most rudimentary, oversimplified version of that. So why is that important? Because you cannot call for justice on someone else while asking for grace and mercy for yourself. So to love mercy for yourself means to equally love mercy for others. And then lastly, walk in purity with your God. That has to do with the way that you are being separated from the world and from the corruption that pertains to that unrenewed mind. So there are ways in which you walked before that were impure because they were polluted by the kingdom of darkness. And so as you walk with the Lord, as you walk in purity with your God, not before your God. That's an important distinction there. There's a with. As you're walking with him, walk in purity. And how does that work? As you walk with him, he reveals to you the areas in your life that have been corrupted and polluted by the kingdom of darkness. And then as he reveals those to you, you continue to release those things to him, and he purifies you so that over time you begin to walk in purity with your God. But what you have to remember is that that is an unto something. Okay, this is the part that people miss when it comes to salvation. You weren't saved out of the kingdom of darkness for no reason. You were saved out of the kingdom of darkness with a purpose. The primary purpose is that you would grow up and become a son of God. That's the primary. But in that, there are also good things that God intended for you to do in the earth that were already prepared beforehand in Christ Jesus. This is what it says in Ephesians, that there are good works, things that God intended for you to do in the earth. Think of it like missions or tasks that he prepared for you, placed in Christ Jesus for you to do, so that when you met him and begin to walk in relationship with him, you would begin to grow in maturity and in strength and in faith and in power. And in those things, you would eventually come to the place where you would be capable to take possession of those tasks and those good things so that you could carry them out in the earth. And so when people talk about the doctrine of sanctification, you're not being sanctified unto nothing. You are being sanctified unto use, so that you can walk in these amazing and glorious things that God has prepared for you to do in the earth. And so the natural question becomes, how do we figure out what these things are? These things that God has prepared for us to do. How do we find out what those things are? Well, it tells us in Romans 12:2. It says, no longer conform to the former pattern of life, or to the pattern of life that accorded with your old nature or your old life. No longer conform to that pattern. Rather, keep allowing yourself to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you will be able to assess what is God's will and agree with him that it is good, satisfying, and able to succeed. So if you go back to Micah 6:8, Micah 6:8 lays the basic framework for how we begin the process of no longer conforming to the former pattern of life. The former pattern of life was to do whatever I wanted to do. The former pattern of life was to respond to every single temptation, to every single threat from the adversary that would threaten my life and cause me to go into fear, and immediately begin to behave in whatever ways, whatever doors that he opened for me. It's like, imagine you're in a room and there's one door that's locked and another door that's unlocked, and God tells you to go through the locked door, and then Satan puts a monster in the room. Well, all of a sudden, we freak out and you run through the other door. Why? Because you fear for your life. But if you knew that God was with you and you didn't have that fear, you would be patient to wait for the other door to unlock instead of running through the door that Satan provided for you. It's the same premise here. And so Micah 6:8 is the beginning of the process of resisting the former patterns of life, the former ways that we once did things, which is acting justly, loving mercy, and walking in purity with our God. That is the basic framework for resisting the former pattern of life. But again, it's not unto nothing. It is unto the process of being transformed by the renewing of our mind. Now, how does that work? Well, as we resist those things, it reveals areas in our life that we don't trust God yet. Now, I talked about this in my other video, but I'll touch on it here. Why do we fear? We fear because we are encountering beings and circumstances that are beyond our power. Or sometimes we're encountering circumstances that are within our power to resolve, but it is not within our power to resolve them in the way that God has intended for us to resolve them. And so in one case, we fear and we take an option because it's beyond our power. And in other cases, we fear and we take power to resolve the situation ourselves instead of waiting on the Lord. But in all cases, it's driven by fear. And how do we overcome fear? By being perfected in our understanding of God's love for us. That's why it says perfect love casts out all fear. As we come to a greater understanding of his love for us, we begin to fear less because we recognize the fact that the most powerful being in existence, I mean, you might even say that he is existence, right? The most powerful being has our back. He loves us. And so I have no need to fear anymore.